What do wool, cacti, and stabbing have in common? This piece of wall art right here. I made it with a craft called needle felting, and today I'll show you exactly how it went, what worked, what didn't, and what I learned along the way. I'm Amanda, and this is Acutely Amanda, where we dive into fiction in odd-numbered seasons and all things crafting in the evens. Since it's season 2, grab your craft hat. We're painting with wool. I'm still pretty new to needle felting. This was my third project, and my first one that's two-dimensional, a style often called painting with wool. You can also felt sculpturally, but this time I kept it mostly flat. Today's kit is of a set of colorful cacti in what looks like a desert with some sheep walking on a hilltop in the distance, and mysteriously some monstera-style leaves at their base. Monstera are jungle plants, not desert ones. It's cute, even if it doesn't make much biological sense. My husband got me this kit for our 7th wedding anniversary, also known as the wool anniversary. It sat untouched for almost 3 years until now. When I started planning season 2, I knew I wanted to highlight different types of crafts, and I definitely wanted a reason to finally work through my backlog. A college advisor once told me I lacked focus because I love too many things. She wasn't wrong, but there are kinder ways to say that. I wanted the season to reflect that variety, and this kit, it jumped off the pile. I'm really glad this wasn't my first ever needle felting project, because the instructions, not super helpful. Technically there were instructions, a printed sheet with steps, but they said things like make the flowers or felt the dark green parts. Not exactly beginner friendly. For anyone new to needle felting, it's the process of stabbing wool repeatedly with a special barbed needle until it mats together and forms shapes. You usually felt on a foam block or a mat. In this case, everything was layered onto a flat felt backing, essentially painting with wool. The instructions sort of told me what to do, but not how to do it. There was a QR code to a YouTube video, but it was a fast-paced visual guide with no narration. I did find it helpful at the end when I was struggling to mount the piece in the hoop, so credit where it's due. There were also things the instructions just didn't mention, like the red flower on top of the tall cactus. It was in the final image, but not in the steps. So I used a mix of the instructions and my best guess from the reference photo and just kind of made it work. One moment that stood out was the suggestion to layer yellow over blue on one of the cacti. I followed that instruction, but I don't think mine turned out the way the designers intended. That said, I actually really like how it looks. Is it what they envisioned? Probably not. But that's the beauty of handmade projects. The mistakes are often the best part. The last touch before hooping was making the monstera style leaves. A picture on the instructions indicated to make these three-dimensionally, then attach them. I made them, then realized I would need to attach them after I put the nearly finished piece in the hoop. Putting the piece in the hoop was harder than I expected, even though I've used embroidery hoops before. It just kept popping out. I watched the tutorial to double check I wasn't missing something. I wasn't. Eventually I figured out that loosening the hoop completely and then tightening slowly while pressing down firmly worked. Then I had to figure out what to do with the extra base felt sticking out around the hoop. The last time I framed a piece in a hoop, I just hot glued it down, but I was out of hot glue gun sticks. I don't always think my plans all the way through before jumping into a craft. I tried tying it down with embroidery floss, but that was not working. So I finally just cut the felt with craft scissors. That worked beautifully. It has a lot more resistance to it than the Aida cloth you used for cross stitch, and I'm not at all worried about it unraveling. So would I recommend this kit? The resulting hanging is beautiful. I've received many compliments on it since finishing it, and I love having it hanging up in my office. I appreciate that the kit came with extra needles. If you're gentle with needle felting, a needle will last you a long time. But I broke my first one, and it's to be expected that a newer needle felter will break the needle, as the faster you felt, the more likely it is. And newer felters, like me, are often a little impatient. Something that stuck out to me about the kit was how generous they were with the wool. I had more than enough of most of the colors, the only exception being the yellow. Once again, I wonder if I misunderstood something about using the yellow with the blue on that one cactus. Maybe I overused it. The instructions, as previously mentioned, were lacking, especially for a newer needle felter. So I'd recommend it either to someone with a little experience or to someone who has an experienced felter convenient to ask for guidance. Of course, I had to dig into the history of needle felting, and this one surprised me the most so far. Unlike amigurumi or wallpaper, which go back centuries or even millennia, needle felting is practically a baby in the craft world. To back up a bit, felting itself is ancient. People have been matting wool fibers together since at least 6500 BCE in Central Asia. That's wet felting, the kind that uses hot water, soap, and agitation. Basically, if you've ever accidentally shrunk a wool sweater in the wash, you've done a version of it. Wet felting has been used for everything from tents and rugs to slippers and decorative textiles. But needle felting, the dry kind that uses a special barbed needle, didn't really emerge until the 1800s, and even then it wasn't used by artists. It was an industrial process developed to make insulation and fabric for factories. It wasn't until the 1980s that artists started adapting industrial felting needles for handcraft. That means this craft is essentially the same age as me. That's when Eleanor and David Stanwood, a husband and wife team living on Martha's Vineyard, began experimenting with sculptural uses of the needle. They passed their techniques to Californian artist Ayala Talpai, who ran with the idea and started creating three-dimensional needle-felted sculptures. Her work inspired Danish artist Brigitte Krag Hensen, who helped spread the technique across Europe. From there, it took off. By the early 2000s, needle felting became a favorite among fiber artists online, especially as felting kits and video tutorials made it more accessible than ever. So, compared to the historical giants like wallpaper or crochet, needle felting is a baby craft, but a wildly expressive one. It lets you take a tuft of wool and stab it into a sculpture. There's something deeply satisfying about that. And while it's only a few decades old, it's already found a loyal following for good reason. It's meditative, sustainable, and, to me anyway, cathartic. Want permission to stab something over and over again for a few hours? Needle felting's for you. This was my first foray into the painting style of needle felting as opposed to the sculptural one. I found it easier to enter a meditative state with this style. There's less to think about with the two dimensions and less risk of poking yourself with the needle, at least for me. While the instructions were a bit lacking, it's a visual piece and was possible to figure out without clear instructions. Plus, even a newbie could find an instructional video online on how to needle felt. Even though my piece doesn't match the reference exactly, it still looks great, and that's the beauty of handmade work. It reflects your personality. But I have to admit, my favorite part of this project was finding out that needle felting is the same age as me. That's it for this episode of Acutely Amanda. If you enjoyed this middle-aged craft, give it a thumbs up or leave a comment. It helps the channel grow. Have you ever tried needle felting or been intrigued by it? Let me know in the comments or tag me on Instagram at opinionsofawolf. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next project. For more behind the scenes and all my creative work, visit opinionsofawolf.com. See you next time. Bye!